The silent Yara Zelith pressed her trembling hands against the ancient communication array, feeling the warmth of its crystalline surface as it hummed with desperate energy. The underground laboratory that had once been the pride of Zelani. Scientific achievement now served as humanity's last refuge. Above her, the beautiful spires of New Thymers burned under the relentless bombardment of the Nexa Dominion fleet. The city that had stood for 3,000 years was crumbling into ash, and Memory. Yara was the last surviving member of the Zelani Science Collective. Her pale blue skin marked with the ritual tattoos that designated her as a keeper of knowledge. Her large, luminous eyes reflected the glow of her instruments as she made final adjustments to the transmission array. The other members of her team had fallen days ago when Nexa ground forces breached the outer laboratory defenses. Now she worked alone, racing against time to complete humanity's final act of defiance. The Nexa Dominion had arrived in Zelani space 6 months ago, their massive black ships emerging from hyperspace like harbingers of doom. They came without warning, without negotiation, without mercy. The Dominion's philosophy was simple and terrifying. Any species capable of interstellar travel posed a potential threat and must be eliminated before they could develop advanced weaponry. The Zelani peaceful explorers who had never known war found themselves facing systematic extermination. Yara's fingers moved across the control interface with practiced precision, channeling the planet's remaining geothermal energy into the transmission array. The device was a masterpiece of Zelani engineering, capable of broadcasting signals across galactic distances through subspace corridors that most species could not access. It had been built to communicate with distant colonies, to share scientific discoveries across the stars. Now it would serve as a funeral pyre for her entire civilization. The message she prepared was unlike anything the Zelani had ever transmitted. Previous communications had been filled with wonder, scientific data, philosophical discussions about the nature of existence among the stars. This final broadcast carried only desperation and the slim hope that somewhere in the vast galaxy, someone might hear their plea and remember that the Zelani had once existed. The words came slowly at first, then poured out like water from a broken dam. She spoke of her people's beauty, their dedication to knowledge and peaceful exploration. She described their crystal cities that sang with the wind, their vast libraries that contained the wisdom of millennia, their gardens that bloomed with flowers from 100 different worlds. But mostly, she spoke of the horror that had befallen them, the Nexa ships that descended like metal vultures, their weapons turning paradise worlds into lifeless rock, the systematic hunting of her people through burning cities, the execution of elders and children alike. The transmission was encoded with mathematical constants and scientific principles that any advanced civilization would recognize, proof that the Zelani were intelligent beings worthy of remembrance. But hidden within the data was something else. Detailed scans of Nexa vessels, their weapon signatures, their tactical formations, everything the Zelani had learned about their destroyers. During 6 months of one-sided warfare, if anyone received this message, they would know exactly what kind of enemy they faced. As Yara completed her recording, explosions shook the underground facility. Nexa ground troops had finally located the hidden laboratory and were cutting through the reinforced barriers with plasma torches. She could hear the distinctive hum of their energy weapons growing closer with each passing moment. Her time was running out, but the array still needed several more minutes to charge to full power. The laboratory's emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across walls lined with scientific instruments and research data, specimens from dozens of Worlds, collected during centuries of peaceful exploration, sat in neat rows like silent witnesses to her civilization's final moments. Each artifact represented years of careful study, collaborative research between brilliant minds who had sought only to understand the universe around them. All of it would be destroyed within the hour. The array's power readings climbed steadily. As Yara made final adjustments to the transmission parameters, the signal would be broadcast on multiple frequencies, scattered across known interstellar communication channels in the hope that someone, somewhere, would detect it. She had programmed the message to repeat continuously for as long as the array had power, a digital ghost that would echo across the galaxy long after she was gone. The sound of metal being torn apart echoed through the corridors as Nexus soldiers breached the final barrier. Yara could hear their heavy footsteps approaching, the mechanical whir of their powered armor, the cold efficiency with which they moved through her laboratory. She had perhaps 2 minutes before they reached the transmission chamber, barely enough time to activate the array and send her people's final words into the void. Her hands moved across the controls one last time, initiating the broadcast sequence that would consume every remaining joule of energy in the facility's power cores. The crystalline components of the array began to glow with brilliant white light as massive amounts of energy flowed through their molecular structure. The air around her shimmered with released power as the message began its journey across impossible distances, traveling through dimensions that normal matter could not touch. The transmission reached the edge of human space 7 days later, detected by the sophisticated sensor arrays aboard Deep Space Monitoring Station Aurora 7 Communications. Specialist Lieutenant David Park had been tracking routine stellar phenomena when an unusual signal appeared on his instruments. The transmission was unlike anything in human databases, its complex harmonics suggesting artificial origin from far beyond explored space. Captain Marcus Chen arrived at the communications center within minutes of receiving Park's urgent alert. Chen was a 20-year veteran of the Colonial Defense Force, a man who had spent his career watching the empty spaces between stars for signs of hostile activity. His weathered face bore the scars of the Titan mining wars, and his steel-grey eyes held the wariness of someone who had seen humanity's enemies emerge from the darkness without warning. The captain studied the transmission data with growing amazement. The signal was definitely artificial, definitely intelligent, and definitely from an alien source. After 3 centuries of searching the stars, humanity had finally received proof that intelligent life existed beyond Earth's solar system. But as Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Aurora 7's xenolinguistics specialist, began the complex process of decoding the alien language, it became clear that this first contact was not the peaceful meeting that scientists had always imagined. Dr. Walsh was Earth's leading expert in theoretical xenobiology and communication protocols, a brilliant woman who had spent her career preparing for exactly this moment. Her dark eyes blazed with excitement as she fed the alien transmission through her most advanced translation algorithms. The language was unlike anything human linguists had ever encountered, but certain mathematical concepts provided a foundation for understanding. As the first rough translations appeared on her screens, Dr. Walsh's excitement turned to horror. The message was not a greeting or an invitation to peaceful contact. It was a desperate plea for help from a dying civilization, a species facing complete extinction at the hands of something called the Nexa Dominion. The decoded message painted a picture of systematic extermination that made humanity's worst conflicts seem like minor disagreements. Captain Chen read the translated message in grim silence, his military mind automatically analyzing the tactical implications. The aliens who called themselves Zalani had been completely unprepared for warfare on this scale. Their peaceful civilization had been swept away by an enemy that viewed their very existence as a threat to galactic stability. Entire worlds had been sterilized, billions of innocent beings murdered simply for existing in the path of Nexa expansion. The captain's report reached Earth's Unified Defense Council within hours, transmitted through quantum communication relays that connected humanity's scattered colonies and monitoring stations. The message that accompanied the alien transmission was brief, but carried implications that would reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the galaxy. For the first time in their history, humans faced concrete evidence that genocidal empires existed among the stars. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez received the full briefing in her office overlooking Earth's primary fleet command complex. Rodriguez was a legend in military circles, the woman who had commanded humanity's defense during the devastating robot wars 40 years earlier. Her silver hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her violet eyes held the sharp intelligence that had made her the youngest admiral in fleet history. She studied the alien message and Captain Chen's analysis with the careful attention of a strategist who understood that this moment would define humanity's future. The fleet that assembled in high Earth orbit represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. 37 warships built in the orbital yards above Luna, incorporating lessons learned from 3 centuries of human conflict. The flagship HMS Retribution, under Admiral Rodriguez's direct command, led a formation that included heavy cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels crewed by the finest officers in human service. As the fleet prepared for its jump to hyperspace, communication arrays across human space continued to monitor the alien transmission. The Zalani message repeated endlessly, its mathematical beauty and desperate plea echoing across the void like a ghost crying for justice. Dr. Yarozelif's final words had traveled further than she could have imagined, reaching beings who possessed something her peaceful people had never developed: the will and ability to fight back against those who would destroy the innocent. The human fleet entered hyperspace 12 hours after receiving final authorization, their faster-than-light drives carrying them toward a confrontation that would announce Earth's presence to the galaxy. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the stars stretch into lines of light as they accelerated beyond the speed of causality itself. Her final message to Earth Command was simple but pregnant with historical significance. Humanity had received its first communication from an alien civilization, and that message had been a cry for help against genocidal monsters. The species that had clawed its way up from a death world, where survival meant constant struggle, was about to discover whether the galaxy held others like them, or whether they alone possessed the strength to stand against those who would destroy the weak simply for existing among the stars. Asterisk thunder from the void. Human fleet materialized at the edge of the Zalani system like phantoms emerging from the cosmic dark. 37 warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls scarred from 3 centuries of human warfare, but still gleaming with the deadly efficiency that marked vessels built by a species that had learned to fight for every resource on an unforgiving world. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the HMS Retribution, her violet eyes fixed on the tactical displays that were updating with horrifying information. The Nexa fleet was even more massive than the Zalani data had suggested. Over 100 alien warships surrounded the blue-green world of Zalani Prime like mechanical vultures circling dying prey. Each Nexa vessel was enormous, some stretching nearly 3 kilometers in length, their dark hulls bristling with weapon emplacements designed for one purpose: the complete destruction of planetary civilizations. The sight would have intimidated any reasonable military commander, Commander Elena Vasquez. Rodriguez's chief tactical officer ran her fingers across the sensor controls with practiced efficiency. Her analysis of the alien fleet revealed numbers that should have been overwhelming, but also unexpected patterns that spoke to her predator's instincts. The Nexa ships were arranged in loose formations around the planet, their movements sluggish and predictable. They had grown complacent after months of facing no resistance. On the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought soul-crusher, Warprime Kythex, observed the bombardment of Zalani Prime with cold satisfaction. He was a veteran of 17 planetary conquests, a being whose reputation for systematic extermination had spread across multiple star systems. His armored form stood nearly 4 meters tall, encased in the black battlesuit that marked his rank among the Dominion hierarchy. The bombardment had been proceeding for days, methodically destroying every trace of Zalani civilization. Kythex took personal pleasure in watching the ancient crystal cities crumble under his weapons, knowing that each explosion erased millennia of cultural achievement. This was how the Nexa had achieved galactic dominance, through overwhelming force and absolute terror. No species had ever successfully resisted their expansion once the Dominion fleets arrived in their space. The Warprime expected this conquest to follow the same pattern as all the others. Deep beneath the surface of Zalani Prime, Elder Jareem huddled with the last survivors of his species in reinforced bunkers that had been built as scientific research stations. The 8,000 Zalani who remained alive represented less than 1% of their original population. Refugees who had fled from a dozen different worlds as the Nexa advance swept across their territory. Jarem was ancient even by Zalani standards, his blue skin marked with the silver patterns that indicated advanced age among his people. The Elder had watched his homeworld burn, had seen his family executed by Nexa soldiers, and had somehow found the strength to guide the survivors to this final refuge. Now, even their deepest shelters were failing under the relentless bombardment from above. The reinforced chambers shook with each impact, crystalline dust raining from the ceiling as the Nexa weapons systematically worked their way across the planet's surface. Children wept in their parents' arms, while the elderly sat in silent resignation, knowing that their ancient civilization was drawing to its final breath above the dying world. Nexa sensors detected the arrival of unknown vessels at the system's edge. The readings were confusing, only 37 ships compared to the massive Dominion fleet, but their energy signatures were unlike anything in the Imperial databases. Warprime Kythex studied the reports with growing curiosity rather than concern. The unknown vessels were tiny compared to Nexa dreadnoughts, the largest barely 1/10 the size of his smallest escort. The human ships moved with an efficiency that immediately caught Commander Vasquez's attention. These were not exploration vessels or merchant craft, but purpose-built warships designed by a species that understood the realities of interstellar combat. Their formations were tight and disciplined, their approach vectors calculated to maximum advantage from multiple angles simultaneously. These newcomers fought like predators, not prey. Kythex dismissed the human fleet as scouts from some minor civilization, probably refugees fleeing the advance of his empire. With casual arrogance born from centuries of easy victories, the war dispatched 20 of his escort vessels to investigate and destroy the newcomers. The ships he chose were older models, sufficient to handle any resistance from primitives who dared to interfere with Dominion operations. He expected the engagement to last less than 30 minutes. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison received the order to engage from Admiral Rodriguez with grim satisfaction. His destroyer, HMS Thunderbolt, was one of humanity's most advanced warships, designed specifically for operations against superior numbers. The ship's experimental armor could deflect most known energy weapons, while its particle beam arrays could punch through any defense ever tested by human engineers. The 20 Nexa ships approached the human formation with the confidence of apex predators facing helpless prey. Their massive hulls bristled with energy weapons that had reduced countless worlds to ash, while their commanders prepared to add another easy victory to their records. They had never faced resistance that could threaten their overwhelming technological advantages, never encountered an enemy willing to fight back with equal fury. Chief Weapons Officer Maria Santos watched her targeting systems lock onto the approaching Nexa vessels with predatory focus. Her particle beam batteries were charged to full capacity, weapons that converted matter directly into energy and hurled it at nearly 15% of light speed. The enemy ships were flying in perfect formation, completely unaware of the death approaching them through the vacuum of space. The first engagement lasted exactly 6 minutes and 43 seconds. Human ships struck from multiple directions with weapons the Nexa had never encountered before. Particle beams tore through alien armor like tissue paper, while fusion torpedoes detonated inside enemy hulls with devastating effect. The energy weapons, designed for planetary bombardment, proved woefully inadequate against ships built to survive in the harsh vacuum of interstellar space. Commander Vasquez monitored the battle from the Retribution's command center, watching with professional satisfaction as human tactics proved devastatingly effective. The Nexa ships were powerful but slow, designed for fighting defenseless targets rather than opponents who could strike back with overwhelming precision. Their massive size, which should have been an advantage, made them perfect targets for human weapons that had been designed to penetrate heavy armor, one by one. The Nexa escort ships died in brilliant explosions that lit up the void of space. Their crews, trained for centuries to terrorize helpless civilians, had no experience fighting an enemy that struck back with calculated fury. The aliens who had conquered dozens of star systems through fear and intimidation discovered what it meant to face opponents who refused to be intimidated by superior numbers. War Prime Kythex stared at his tactical displays in shock and disbelief as 20 of his ships vanished from the sensors in less than 7 minutes. The small alien fleet had not only survived his escort force, but had completely destroyed it without suffering a single casualty. Such a thing was impossible according to everything he knew about warfare and galactic power structures. The intercepted communications that Dr. Walsh's translation programs decoded painted a picture of alien confusion and growing fear. The Nexa had never encountered resistance this effective, had never faced an enemy that could match their technological superiority with superior tactics and training. For the first time in their imperial history, they were facing opponents who might actually be able to defeat them in open combat. Admiral Rodriguez opened a communication channel to the Nexa fleet, her voice carrying across the void with the cold authority of a judge delivering sentence. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every ship in both fleets could hear her words. Her voice was steady and filled with the righteous anger of a species that had learned the true cost of genocide among the stars. The Admiral's message was brief but carried implications that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. She informed the Nexa that humanity had received the Zilani distress signal and had come not as conquerors but as protectors of the innocent. They had witnessed the evidence of Nexa genocide, had seen the burned worlds and murdered civilizations described in the desperate transmission. The empire that had spread terror across multiple star systems was about to learn what terror truly meant when directed by beings who understood justice. Kythex's response was exactly what Rodriguez had expected from a species that had grown fat and complacent from centuries of easy victories. The War Prime threatened to destroy the human homeworld, promised to hunt down every human colony and reduce them to ash. His words carried the arrogance of an empire that had never faced serious resistance, the casual cruelty of beings who viewed other species as insects to be eliminated. The battle that followed would be recorded in human history as the moment their species announced its presence to the galaxy. 37 human warships engaged over 100 Nexa vessels in a conflict that should have been impossible to win. But the humans had advantages that their enemies could not understand. They were products of a death world where survival meant constant adaptation. Crews trained to fight outnumbered against superior odds. Captain Elizabeth Torres commanded the heavy cruiser HMS Vengeance with the skill of a master artist. Her ship's main batteries fired continuously, each shot precisely targeted to cause maximum damage to critical systems. The Nexa vessels, massive size, meant to intimidate, made them impossible to miss, while their slow maneuvers made them perfect targets for human precision weapons. The Nexa energy weapons, designed for planetary bombardment, proved woefully inadequate against ships that had been built to survive the harsh realities of interstellar warfare. Human vessels danced between the slow-moving alien beams, their advanced armor deflecting shots that would have vaporized lesser craft. The technological gap was becoming apparent with each passing minute of combat. Colonel Sandra Hayes led the first boarding action against the Nexa heavy cruiser Dark Thunder. Her Marines, equipped with powered armor that turned them into walking tanks, fought through corridors designed for beings twice their size. The Nexa shock troops, trained to terrorize helpless civilians, were completely unprepared for professional soldiers who thrived in the chaos of close combat. The Marine assault lasted 12 minutes from breach to surrender. Hayes and her troops moved through the alien ship like a force of nature, their advanced weapons cutting through Nexa battle armor as if it were cloth. The aliens who had spread fear across multiple star systems discovered what it meant to face humanity's finest warriors in an environment where only the strongest survived. On Zilani Prime, Elder Jareem watched the impossible battle unfold through sensors in his underground shelter. The readings seemed like a miracle. The tiny human fleet was systematically destroying the massive Nexa armada that had terrorized his people for months. The elderly Zilani stared at his instruments in amazement as ship after ship vanished from the Dominion formation. Dr. Keller, the bunker's chief scientist, monitored the engagement with growing wonder. The Zilani had been a peaceful species for millennia, knowing war only as an abstract concept from their ancient history. They had never imagined that warfare could be conducted with such precision and overwhelming effectiveness. These humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and tactical brilliance that defied everything they understood about combat. War Prime Kythex felt emotions he had not experienced in decades as his fleet disintegrated around him. Fear, confusion, and for the first time in his long career, respect for an enemy that could match Nexa's strength with superior skill. His massive fleet was being systematically dismantled by opponents who seemed to anticipate his every move, who struck with weapons that penetrated armor designed to withstand anything in the known. Galaxy. The turning point came when Admiral Rodriguez executed a maneuver that should have been impossible. The HMS Retribution materialized inside the Nexa formation through what appeared to be a short-range hyperspace jump, its weapons firing at point-blank range into the engines of 3 heavy cruisers simultaneously. The demonstration of tactical innovation and technological superiority broke what remained of Nexa resistance. As Dominion ships began fleeing the battle, the true nature of human warfare became apparent. Rodriguez's fleet did not allow defeated enemies to escape and regroup. They hunted down fleeing vessels with cold efficiency, their faster ships running down alien stragglers like wolves chasing wounded prey. No ship that had participated in genocide would be allowed to survive and continue their crimes elsewhere. The battle for Zilani Prime ended 8 hours after it began, with over 70% of the Nexa fleet destroyed and the remainder fleeing in complete disorder. Human ships had suffered minimal damage, their superior technology and tactics proving devastatingly effective against opponents who had grown complacent through centuries of facing defenseless victims. Admiral Rodriguez received a priority transmission from Earth as her crews worked to secure captured Nexa vessels and provide aid to the Zilani survivors. The message from Fleet Command carried news that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Human scout ships had located 43 other Nexa-occupied systems, and the President had authorized the largest military operation in human history. Elder Jareem emerged from his underground shelter to witness human marines working alongside Zilani survivors. These strange aliens showing unexpected gentleness as they helped rebuild shattered lives. The beings who had proven so deadly in space combat demonstrated equal capacity for compassion and healing. The elderly Zilani leader realized that his people had been rescued by something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that possessed both the strength to fight evil and the wisdom to protect the innocent. As the human fleet prepared for the next phase of their campaign against the Nexa Dominion, Admiral Rodriguez stood on her bridge looking out at the stars surrounding Zilani Prime. Her species had announced its presence to the galaxy not as explorers or traders, but as the beings who would hold the line against those who preyed upon the defenseless. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the age of unopposed genocide was finally ending. The message that humanity sent to the galaxy was clear and uncompromising. Any species that chose systematic extermination as a tool of policy would face the combined might of beings who had learned to fight in the harsh crucible of a world that bred warriors. The galaxy had found its protectors, and the universe would never be the same. Asterisk.